This is something special. There's a reason why this recipe is called the best chicken parmesan. Chicken parmesan can be so good. You can't go wrong with that crispy, crunchy chicken, the melty mozzarella cheese, and then it gets covered in that delicious tomato sauce. But the problem is the chicken can be bland and soggy, and the cheese can get really rubbery, and the tomato sauce often is just mediocre. Well, the version I'm gonna make for you today is gonna fix each one of those problems. So let's start with our chicken first. I've got 2 boneless, skinless chicken breasts here, and they're about 6 to 8 ounces each. Now, using my boning knife, I'm just gonna go just around and trim any visible fat or connective tissue you may see hanging on to the chicken. There are a few different ways for how to prepare your chicken for chicken parmesan, and I often see people just pounding the entire breast. But what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna cut them in half horizontally. And what you can do to ensure it's an easy way of doing so is you can just pop the chicken in the freezer for like 15 minutes, and it just slightly firms up the chicken, so it's a little bit easier to cut in half. And I'm just using a sharp boning knife, essentially just kind of butterflying it. And then once you get to the edge, you can just cut on through. And then once you do that, you have 2 pieces of chicken that are even in thickness. So I'm gonna do the second breast here, same way. And you don't wanna do any sawing motions if you can help it. Just nice long strokes, and then just cut it all the way down the breast. Now I am actually going to pound them a little bit thinner. I want them to be a 1/2 inch thick. These pieces, they're gonna cook at the same rate because they're gonna be even thickness, the 1/2 inch thick. But they're also a really nice portion size too, as opposed to those really big hunks of chicken you can often find in the restaurants. So I'm gonna pound them again to a 1/2 inch thick. Okie doke. So I'm gonna sprinkle each side of each chicken breast with 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna season the chicken, yes, but it's also gonna ensure that the chicken's not gonna dry out during cooking. So flip that right over and repeat with the remaining 4 sides. All right, so I'm gonna let these hang out at room temperature for about 20 minutes, get cleaned up, and then we are gonna move on to our tomato sauce. This is a really versatile version. I love this recipe. It's great for pizza, pasta, and I think it's better than any jarred sauce I've tried because those can be too sweet or too salty, so this is just right. I'm gonna start by heating up some extra virgin olive oil in the saucepan over medium heat, and I'm gonna let that go until shimmery. I'm gonna mince 2 garlic cloves right into the saucepan. All right. And then I'm gonna add some salt. I need 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. A little bit more there. And I need 1/4 teaspoon of dried oregano. And finally, just a pinch of the red pepper flakes. Awesome. All right, now I'm gonna just stir this and cook until fragrant, which will take like 30 seconds. And then in the meantime, I'm just going to chop some basil for the end. I just need 2 tablespoons. I just like to bunch all the dried basil up together, run my knife through it. Most important part when you're chopping herbs, especially with delicate things like basil, is make sure that they are dry. If not, they're gonna turn black and muddy and it's just not the most beautiful thing to look at. So I'm gonna save this basil for later. Put that in this beautiful little dish. And now I'm gonna add the tomatoes. I've got 1 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Speaking to me there, saying hello, hi. All right, I'll let that calm down for a sec while I grab my sugar. We're gonna add a little bit of sugar, just 1/4 of a teaspoon. Just gonna help to mellow out a little bit of acidity that can happen when you have the canned crushed tomatoes. There we go. Once it's at a simmer, I'm gonna reduce the heat to medium-low and let it go for about 20 minutes until slightly thickened. So I mentioned a crispy coating, and I also mentioned really melty, gooey mozzarella cheese. So I'm gonna make our cheese mixture first before I make the coating for the chicken. And I have equal parts mozzarella cheese and fontina. They're 2 ounces each. that are shredded. Now what the fontina is gonna do is it's gonna help the mozzarella stay nice and stringy, and it's also gonna add a little bit of extra sharpness and a little bit of extra saltiness, which is always welcome. So there's gonna be no rubbery cheese on my watch. All right, I'm gonna set that aside. All right, so now onto that crispy coating. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to grate 1.5 ounces of some Parmesan cheese. So what's strange is that if you were to look at a bunch of recipes for chicken Parmesan, a lot of the time they don't even have Parmesan in the chicken Parmesan. But this uses a good amount, and we're gonna be putting the Parmesan in the coating. So it's about 3/4 cup once it's all grated. I'm starting with 1.5 ounces. And I'm using a rasp style grater, and that's always great because it gets the texture of that grated cheese to be super feathery, and it just melts beautifully once it hits the heat in the skillet. And don't throw away your Parmesan rind. Keep them in your freezer, add them to tomato sauces, or if you're making like a minestrone or something, it always adds a ton of extra savory flavor, a bit of umami. All right, the Parm part of our chicken Parm, check. I'm gonna grab some panko. It's the Japanese breadcrumbs. These are a little bit more coarse than the regular Italian style breadcrumbs or the American style breadcrumbs. And they're gonna get really nice and crisp. And again, maintain that crunchiness that we're looking for the chicken Parm. So that was about 1/2 cup. Then we're gonna add some spices in here. Got some garlic powder. I need 1/2 teaspoon just to reinforce that garlic flavor, but not go too crazy. And more dried oregano. I'm gonna do 1/4 teaspoon. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of pepper, about 1/4 teaspoon into this coating as well. All right, just give it a good mix. You'll notice I didn't put any salt in this coating, and that's because of the Parmesan in there is gonna add a little bit of saltiness just on its own. All right, so that's our crispy coating. Now I've got a tablespoon of some flour in this second shallow dish. I'm gonna add an egg in here, and this is gonna be the glue. It's gonna be the coating on the chicken that's gonna keep our coating nice and adhered to the chicken. It's not gonna fall off. Like a lot of times that can be such a bummer when you go through the process of frying chicken or frying pork cutlets or something, and then you're eating it and the coating just falls off. It's sort of sad. Not gonna happen today. And the flour here is just gonna ensure that it's a little bit thicker and it's gonna be a little bit more aggressive as a glue here. I've got the chicken that's been hanging out for 20 minutes. I already went ahead and patted both sides dry with paper towels, because what can happen when it's sitting there with the salt on it is a lot of the moisture can actually come to the surface, so it's gonna be a little bit more wet. So to ensure that the coating sticks really well onto the chicken, you wanna be sure to dry it with paper towels on both sides. I've got my assembly line ready and I'm armored to go here. I'm gonna just use some tongs, but you could also use your hands, and just dredge the chicken in our glue coating first, that egg flour mixture, and then in our Parmesan panko mixture. Be sure to press pretty firmly just to make sure you get as much of that coating on there as possible. And then once you pick it up, just shake off any excess. That is looking really good. And just repeat with the remaining 3 cutlets. And I do think it's important to start with the Parmesan that's in the wedge form as opposed to buying it pre-grated. That stuff has something called cellulose in it, and it's not going to melt as well. And the quality's not as good too as the Parmesan that you buy in the wedge form. And the tongs are great here too, because you can just pick up a little bit of extra Parmesan mixture, tap it on there, and again, just be sure to get any excess crumbs and stuff off of that. All right, I'm gonna clean up and then it's time to fry. Okay, so I've got 1/3 cup of vegetable oil here, and I'm using a 10-inch nonstick skillet. I'm just gonna heat that over medium-high heat until shimmering. So I'm gonna cook the cutlets 2 at a time, and that just ensures that we're not gonna crowd the pan. Okay, so I'm gonna cook each side for about 1.5 to 2 minutes, and what I'm looking for is that the cutlets are really nice and golden brown on both sides. Because we pounded these chicken cutlets pretty thinly to a 1/2 inch thick, they're gonna cook pretty quickly. So I have a paper towel lined plate here. It's just gonna absorb any extra oil or grease that the chicken's holding onto. And in the meantime, I am going to cook the remaining cutlets until golden brown, about 1.5 to 2 minutes per side. while those cutlets are cooking, I went ahead and transferred the chicken to a rim baking sheet because we're actually going to finish cooking the chicken with the cheese on it in the broiler. So this may seem a little unconventional, and I agree, it definitely is. But remember, we wanted that crunchy, crispy coating. We wanted that melty cheese, no rubbery cheese on my watch. So this is the equal parts Fontina and mozzarella from earlier. And I'm just gonna divide it evenly onto the chicken cutlets. And then just any that kind of fell off, just go around and pick up so it melts on the chicken, not on the sheet pan. I'm gonna put the chicken under the broiler, let it go for 2 to 4 minutes until the cheese is melted and beginning to brown. So while the chicken is broiling, I'm just gonna stir in the basil from earlier. Again, it's 2 tablespoons into the sauce that we made, and it's been hanging out, staying nice and warm. Give it a good stir, and I can smell the chicken, so I'm gonna go grab it. Yum! I'd say it looks pretty successful so far. So I'm just gonna transfer the chicken to a platter here. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of tomato sauce on each piece of chicken, about 2 tablespoons or so. And you can save the rest for some pasta. This looks so delicious. I'm just gonna top it with a little bit more basil. I tore about like a 1/4 cup of some basil. I love the look of torn basil. I just think it's a little bit prettier than the shreds, and it also is a little bit more substantial when you bite into it. Oh yeah, that coating, I see some crispiness in our future. And because of that sauce, we just put a couple tablespoons on each piece. It's not like flooding the chicken with the sauce, so it's not gonna get soggy. This is, I would enter a contest with this chicken Parmesan. So, I mean, that Parmesan is like beyond flavor right now, because not only are you getting sort of like the melty frico in that coating, but you're getting like the saltiness that it adds and a little bit of nuttiness. And the Fontina and the mozzarella is beautifully melted. No strange textures here. The basil, all of it, the tomato sauce, and most importantly, that chicken is so tender and really well cooked and seasoned beautifully. There's a reason why this recipe is called the best chicken Parmesan. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out the recipe, the link for it is in the description below. See you next time.